Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob McCoy. I'm the mayor, and with me is Councilmember Claudia Bilde La Peña, and the two of us have had the distinct privilege to be seated on the ad hoc committee for homelessness to wrap our mind around what we're facing not only as a city, but as a county and a state, and also nationwide. A lot of you know some of the statistics, especially in California. California leads the nation in homelessness. Of the four largest cities in the United States for homeless population, those four cities are right here in California. There's been a 50% increase in homelessness in Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Diego. They've been facing all kinds of increases. Here in Thousand Oaks, and we're going to hear from not only our police chief, Tim Hagel, in regards to the conditions here in Thousand Oaks, but we have two officers specifically designated. It's our vulnerable population officers that work with the homeless. And in relation to that, we have statistics for you in numbers. Approximately 80% of the homeless within our community have a nexus right here in the city, meaning family members or local. They're not shipped in from other locations. You're going to hear a lot of things because Councilmember Bilde La Peña and myself have gained a tremendous understanding as this panel has been instrumental in us trying to be proactive and not react but respond to what is an ever-increasing issue in the state. You're also going to see from the panel, as we've been going through council meetings, especially with the Boise, Idaho ruling, you're going to see that some of these limitations we have been thrust on us by the federal government and the state as well. And Councilmember Bilde La Peña and myself have been lamenting the fact that as a city we're losing our autonomy in many regards through the state level, and we want to be proactive in this. And we see and realize that this is going to be a community effort. In addition to today, we're not going to come up with the solutions today. This is an opportunity for us to have a conversation about this, and your questions will be instrumental because the questions you'll be asking is the same questions that the community's asking, but you've had the time and the wherewithal to come out today to be able to ask these questions. And we have a panel that will have the answers, and if we don't, we'll find them. We don't have the solution at this moment. This is a federal, state, county issue, and we're dealing with the symptoms of, first of all, we have the highest home prices, we have the highest poverty, we have the highest homelessness. These are conditions in this state that are difficult, and as a city that has autonomy, we're trying to respond in such a manner that we can protect our constituency and be compassionate in the same process. So with that being said, I want to welcome you today, and I wanted to also have Councilmember Bilde La Peña come up. Afterwards, you're going to share about the insights of the video, but we're going to show you a video that was put together that'll give you a little bit of what we've gleaned in the over 2 years of meeting and studying this entire concern. And there's lots to wrap your mind around. So we'll begin with this video. It's about 13 to 15 minutes, so take a look, enjoy it.
Each day you wake up and you have to try and figure out where you're going to either take a shower, where you're going to eat, your next meal's coming from. You just got to try and figure out what to do every day.
This is what I miss the most: clean clothes and a shower.
Sleeping outside is terrifying. You never really get a good night's sleep.
I've had my car broken into at least twice with me present.
My situation was leading me to think of suicide.
People die out here. It can be really a toll on your physical system to be out here. People can get really sick.
And the kids that ride their skateboards, they call me the man who lives behind the wall. I got a nickname. The man behind the wall.
Homelessness can happen to anyone. Anyone. It touches all walks of life. It touches all races, all cultures, all religions. If you put together the right combination of catastrophes or disasters, this is not something that any of us are immune from.
I moved to Thousand Oaks in 1971. I was 11 years old. I'm a mechanic and an assembly technician. I work for Rockwell International Rocketdyne Division. I work for ITT. Show me a blueprint, give me the part. I'm Christian, don't use drugs, smoke some cigarettes every now and again, but I'm an alcoholic. I've been homeless for 2.5 years.
I come from a field of software engineering. I worked in that field for approximately 35 years. I had a husband. He was disabled. I took care of him. When the economy went bad, it went in parallel with my husband developing a terminal illness. So there was a big struggle between trying to find any gainful employment whatsoever because my job had been, my whole team had been outsourced to other countries. And my husband died at about 5 years ago on Thanksgiving. I was out of my house 2 weeks later at Christmas time. I'm in treatment by a doctor for all this time, and I have nervous disorders, and I take medication for those disorders. I'm classified as homeless because I'm not in a stationary structure. I'm in a vehicle.
It was hard. It was very hard adjusting from a life of being a millionaire to being a pauper. I did very well working for the bank. I was top 10% nationwide in sales. Business was good until the recession started. I just kept living my same lifestyle instead of downsizing or whatever, and I just ran out of money. First losing the family house because I couldn't make the payments anymore. And then moving out, and then I found out I got cancer. Being on chemo in my car was a very hard thing to do.
The state of California leads the nation in poverty. The U.S. Census Bureau says we're over 20% of our citizens are impoverished. It has affected not only the county of Ventura, but also the city of Thousand Oaks. The city has approximately 250 plus homeless. Now, granted, we don't have the same homelessness population that LA does or that San Francisco does, but it still has increased in the course of time I've been here as the mayor. And so as a city, we need to address it.
Our officers out on the streets are encountering homeless persons somewhere between 3 to 5 times per shift per officer. So it gives us a good sample base of our residents of who are these people? And it's a big question I get asked by the public. Who are these people? Well, my answer is simple. They are us. They are your brother, your sister, your cousin, your neighbor, your coworker. These are people that are born and raised in this area. In fact, the mass majority of the people that are homeless on our streets in the city of Thousand Oaks are from here. Do we have people from out of the area? Absolutely. But we have a good majority of the people are from right here in our backyards in Thousand Oaks.
Our largest growing population of homeless are the elderly and those who are disabled. I wish that the people in the community could see what we see here, and that's moms and dads and children. A lot of the people that we deal with day in and day out have nothing to do with addictions or mental illness. They just have been dealt a bad hand.
The Thousand Oaks Police Department has a very unique and innovative policing unit called the Vulnerable Populations Unit. This is 2 highly trained officers that are out in the field every day on the streets of Thousand Oaks, providing both enforcement services and social services to this segment of the residents of our population. These vulnerable populations officers know each and every homeless person out there. They deal with them on a daily basis and partner along social service providers such as Harbor House and LSS and Ventura County Behavioral Health to provide both services and to assist the community to hold these homeless people to the same standards as any resident.
So Lutheran Social Services, also known as LSS, is a faith-based nonprofit focused on serving those in need in the Southern California area. Now we have a location in Thousand Oaks. It's a drop-in center, and here we provide daily showers, laundry, food, and clothing services to those who are homeless or lower income. One of the ways that really helps us and allows us to connect individuals to resources is actually the building that we're located at. It's called Community Conscience, and they host a large amount of nonprofit organizations and allow us to stay there at no cost, no rent or anything like that. So we have a dental clinic, we have human service agency upstairs, health checkups, child counseling, a lot of different resources. The biggest and the best way, right, how we are able to help individuals sustain themselves is by collaborating with other nonprofit agencies that have a similar mission in mind.
Harbor House is a newly founded nonprofit, and we started out of a need and a desire to serve the local homeless, the local poor, trying really hard to use local donations to serve local needs. We provide case management. That's probably the most valuable thing that we provide, because it's the one thing that can make a significant difference in the life of a homeless person. And we provide emergency assistance to people who are housed but living very fragilely so.
I use EBT for my food, and that's it.
During the day, I'm lucky I go to the Goebel Center, Senior Center, whatever, and because I'm over 60, I get a free lunch.
People give us food donations all the time. Very rarely have to go buy food.
You know, Harbor House and LSS, we have food to feed the homeless.
We provide a nightly meal, a hot meal, 365 days a year. There are over 700 community volunteers involved in that, cooking the meal, serving the meal, hosting the meal.
Every night that homeless dinners are served, they reach approximately average 50, 60 people, winter as well as summer. The very people whom we fed tonight, whom we feed every night in the city of Thousand Oaks, on church grounds mostly, are people that you would never suspect of being homeless. You would never suspect it. They are the working poor. They simply don't earn enough money in order to pay the rent, to make the mortgage.
I have 0 addictions, no disabilities. I don't smoke or drink. I've never panhandled or asked for money. I believe my boss knows I'm homeless. I work 40 hours a week and had that job for 10 years now. I can't rent a house or apartment because my credit is real bad. I'm saving my money, I'm saving my paychecks. I'd like to be able to sustain myself once I get an apartment.
We have over 380 miles of streets in this city, and there is somewhere between 10 and 20% of the homeless population lives in their cars. That is not a crime, but they are required to move that car every 3 days, just like any other resident in the community.
I've been homeless, living in my vehicle for 3 years. I was a teacher. I was a sociology degree. I worked at a place like Harbor House, helping this type of populations. I'm on the housing list, many mansions in the HUD housing list, but when I got here 3 years ago, I said, how long? And they said the waiting list is 8 to 20 years. I can't afford to rent a house in Thousand Oaks on my Social Security income. I could maybe rent a room for like $650, but what am I gonna eat? You know, and I have to pay my Medicare, and I have to, you know, and I wanna keep my vehicle. I'm still able to drive, and even if I had a room, I wanna keep my car. We do have winter shelter here, but it's from December 1st until March 31st. Then we're back out.
People can spend all day long just trying to get to a church for the evening, after which the buses have already stopped running.
Being homeless and being jobless and not having a driver's license, it's hard to move back and forth in between the areas where they're letting you stay and feeding you. It would be easier if it was more centralized.
I think it would make a huge dent if the shelters ran all year long instead of a few months, and then people get booted out and they have to run up and down the trails trying to find campsites. It's pretty chaotic.
I think by the time that some of our homeless are living in an encampment, say, I think that the health status is horrendous. I think they're living in dehumanizing situations. I think their life expectancy is significantly lower than the rest of the population.
And when we're in those camps, you have to visualize it. There are no bathrooms, there is no running water, there are no facilities. So everything that a person does to live in one of these camps is left right there. So all of their waste belongings, both personal from themselves or from their living conditions, accumulate and pile up.
We need a permanent shelter for people. We need a place where they can be. a bed that they can call their own, and a community. I think community, in other parts of the country, we're learning that community is so often the solution to a lot of what ails them.
When the Boise ruling went into effect in 2019, the city of Thousand Oaks was left looking and saying, we must allow homeless to sleep on our streets based on the federal ruling. We took that ruling and we applied what are called circadian hours. That's when a human being needs sleep, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. And we applied that to limit people sleeping on public property here in the city of Thousand Oaks. We actually enforced it to a greater level than the federal government did. But we are committed as a city. The city wants to help, but we want to do this as a community.
In order to manage the homeless problem in Thousand Oaks, we need the participation and buy-in from various groups. Right now, the City of Thousand Oaks is the convener. We are bringing together various nonprofit groups, the Thousand Oaks Police Department, the County of Ventura, the churches. We need everybody together in order to tackle this problem. And the biggest part really also is the resident, the neighbor. We have got to have the understanding, compassion, and help from the residents.
Sometimes people drive by and give me $2, give me $5, give me $20. I wait for people to give me money and I go buy alcohol.
It is Harbor House's belief that panhandling is a problem in our community. I think that's because people think that we're helping a problem by throwing money at it, and that's not always the solution.
We're professionals. We know what we're doing. We know how to help that person go beyond panhandling every day. If you have an agency working with them, you have an actual case manager who can determine what their actual needs are and develop a plan with them to move on to that next step, if that's something that they want to do.
When we give intentionally to organizations that are working on this problem strategically, and we're not just throwing money out the window to whoever's asking, I think the money goes further, and I think it makes a bigger difference.
The City of Thousand Oaks implores you, please don't give money or food to a homeless individual. There are many wonderful nonprofits that already supply these services to the homeless, and they also have caseworkers. We need to direct these homeless to those organizations. So as a city, would you join me in helping them help the homeless? Grateful for the city staff putting that video together. And by the way, you saw some recommendations and some ideas that some of the folks on the video felt were necessary. But suffice it to say, even on this panel, we don't all agree on exactly what the solution is. We're still in the process, and that's why this is so vital. Before I introduce Councilmember Bill de la Peña, who's going to come up and share some thoughts, the one thing I did want to say is thank you. You know, the City of Thousand Oaks is a remarkable community that when we put out a request for volunteer help, we always have a list of folks that want to come in and participate and volunteer their time and services. When we put a request out to come and dialogue and have a time of community understanding and wrapping our mind around this issue we're facing, just look around the room, you showed up. It's a great community to live in, and this is one of the things that we're so grateful for, and it's an honor to be the mayor of a city so remarkable. And I have to say to also, yeah, clap for yourselves, because I heard you clapping. You deserve that. Yeah. My colleague, Councilmember Bill de la Peña, Claudia to me, she's wonderful. Interestingly enough, the two of us are probably the most ideologically opposed, but get along the best. And it's a healthy combination for this homeless committee. And so, Claudia, would you come up and share with everybody? Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Rob. What we do share is our faith in God, and we pray for one another, and it helps, doesn't it?
Careful, you can't talk about that too much.
That's quite all right. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here on a Sunday afternoon to address an issue that is near and dear to many residents' hearts. If you just look at social media, in particular next door, Over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of anger, frustration coming from the residents in their comments that they're posting. Comments such as, I worked hard all my life to live in a city like Thousand Oaks. I bought a house and I don't want to have to look at anyone panhandling. I worked too hard to look at tents. Just round them all up and ship them out of the city. So that is pretty much a sentiment that we have seen over and over and over again. But as you just saw, it's not as easy as rounding them up and shipping them out. It is our responsibility, moral responsibility, to see that we can help one another. Now, you may not agree with that, but I think that we can all agree that we cannot continue to ignore this problem and that we do need to address it, and the best job we can do is to address this collectively. So what I would like to also mention is that the video that you saw, I thought was important to share with you, our community, because it is really the only way that we can show you to show you how many of the homeless live, where they are, what brought them to homelessness, and that really most of them are in a situation, or many of them are in a situation because of environments and conditions that eventually were beyond their control. So we have now many organizations locally, nonprofits, Harbor House, for example, Lutheran Social Services, that are trying to address this. The way that my family and I, many years ago, 5 years ago, became involved with this was serving dinners to the homeless at our church, the wonderful St. Patrick's Episcopal Church. So it's the churches, St. Patrick's, along with others churches here in town who have really had the responsibility or burden of feeding the homeless in this town. And I recognize some of the persons whom we have fed in the past, and it requires 700 volunteers throughout the city to bring food to the table for our neighbors who just are not as fortunate as we are. I hope that this symposium will, for those who are not familiar with all of the intricacies of the issue, that this symposium will open your mind and perhaps provide a better understanding of what it is that we are dealing with. And we worked on this symposium for quite some time now. We feel that this is just the beginning of addressing homelessness. And I would like to thank city staff, of course also the police, for putting this together, helping us put this together. I never thought that I would be looking at Chief Hagel and his deputies, for example, Juan Cordova and Deputy Richter, who actually are almost exclusively dealing with homeless persons in our city. They are more than deputies, they are social workers. And they work very closely with nonprofit organizations such as Harbor House. Deputies Cordova and Richter know almost all of the homeless persons by name, know where they used to live, know who their families are, they know their problems. They are the only two, besides maybe Denise Cortez, who the homeless are. And there is something wrong when it falls on deputies, police officers to deal with this issue. We need to fix that. So I would like to, with that, introduce our Deputy City Manager, Deputy City Manager Ingrid Hardy. And she has been helping us, Rob and myself, with city staff Ashley Humes and Tracy Noonan, City Attorney, in putting all of this together. And Ingrid will take it over from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm just going to provide you with a background and overview of homelessness in Thousand Oaks and some of the work that the City Council has been doing and the progress that we made. And I also want to share with you the numbers from our most recent point-in-time count. So homelessness is one of the City Council's top 10 priorities, and that is to focus on collaborative efforts to address homelessness and mental health issues. The ad hoc committee was formed in early 2018, and you've heard from both Claudia and Rob today. They've spent a significant amount of time learning the landscape of homelessness in Thousand Oaks, what that really looks like in this community, what are some of the challenges, and they've been working together on how do we respond to this issue in Thousand Oaks. As you can see, it is a complex humanitarian crisis, and Thousand Oaks is not immune to this crisis. And in recognizing that, the city understands we cannot and should not act alone in addressing this issue. Our role is to serve as the convener between county agencies, residents, businesses, nonprofit organizations, the faith community, law enforcement, in responding to homelessness. While oftentimes homelessness is characterized one-dimensionally, locally, our vulnerable populations fit a range of demographics, and the issue presents itself in many forms. According to the National Coalition for the Homeless, the leading causes of homelessness include mental illness, substance abuse, wages, inadequate retirement. Of course, we know the cost of living, affordable housing, domestic violence, and lack of employment opportunities. We also know that in speaking to our local service providers here in Thousand Oaks, there are a significant number of homeless due to inadequate retirement and youth that are transitioning out of foster care. And so they call this group the transitional age youth, and those are kids between the ages of 18 and 25. And so transitioning out of foster care and getting on their feet is certainly a challenge in what we're experiencing here. The point-in-time count is a federal mandate, and it's used to allocate funding for homeless resources and programs. Every year, law enforcement, volunteers, and local service organizations take a day to count the homeless in all communities. The U.S. Department of Urban and Housing Development define homeless as persons in emergency shelter, persons in motels paid for by a program, those in transitional housing, and persons living in spaces not meant for human habitation. What the point-in-time count does not include are those individuals that are living with family or friends, persons paying for their own hotel room, at-risk populations, and persons that are either incarcerated or in the hospital. Since the point-in-time count is also one thing to consider is that since this is a count of one day of the year, the homeless count does not take into consideration those that are experiencing episodic homelessness. So, they have a roof over their head for a certain period of time, and then maybe they're back out on the streets. So those are not included in the account. In 2019, the count for Ventura County was 1,669 adults and children. This number represents an increase of 28.5% when compared to those counted in 2018. And over 2017, it's a 44.5% increase. For the city of Thousand Oaks, you can see that our number increased from 80 persons in 2018 to 103 in 2019. And this is a 28.5% increase. And you may have remember from the mayor's comments and then also from the video that was just shown, our numbers are hovering over 250 because again, it's a point-in-time count and it's that one day that persons are being counted. So our increase here in Thousand Oaks is aligning with the numbers that other cities are experiencing in Ventura County, as well as across the state and nationally. So this graph here is just the numbers for Ventura County, all the cities in Ventura County, as well as the unincorporated area of Ventura County. And Thousand Oaks has the 4th lowest homeless population out of all of the cities. So why the increase? According to our Ventura County Continuum of Care, the county count is up overall due to more accurate systems for counting, and also additional factors such as covering homeless encampments, improved efforts in counting and surveying persons living in RVs and vehicles. There's limited affordable vacancies and rising rents. We also have an increase of persons experiencing homelessness due to the recent wildfires. And there's also an increase in persons who are experiencing homelessness for the first time. So this is what we call the subpopulation data. And so out of the persons that are counted, there are additional questions that are asked of these individuals. The subpopulation data is self-reported to the volunteers that are assisting with the count. So if someone indicates they have a mental health issue, it's not the volunteer's job to question whether or not that's accurate. They just record the information. It's important to note that a majority of our homeless are local, meaning that they have roots or ties to Thousand Oaks. And the striking number, I think you'll see from this slide, is that 43% of those experiencing homelessness are experiencing this for the first time. And this is partially due to the prevention efforts not being robust enough at this time. And what I mean by that, for example, you have a rapid rehousing program where an agency can provide assistance with a security deposit or first month's rent. And so while the person receiving those services may be able to, receive that assistance, to be able to continue to stay housed still remains a challenge. Some of the other factors and considerations, and again, this goes back to the point in time count, there's that one day. Under other federal statutes for tracking, the Ventura County Office of Education reports that 5,291 students were identified as homeless, and 10% of those meet the HUD definition of homeless. Further, the Ventura County Healthcare Agency reports that 12,618 persons are enrolled in the county's health care for the homeless program, and 32% of those individuals meet the HUD definition of homelessness. So again, the point in time count does not capture all of those that are experiencing homelessness. So one of the advantages that we have with the Ventura County Continuum of Care is that there's a coordinated entry system where someone who is receiving services, their information is available to all organizations throughout the county. And there's also a management information system where the different service providers are able to track how people are doing and responding to the services being provided. So the numbers before you are countywide, but I also want to draw attention to the 66 persons that were housed locally last year. And so it's good to see that the resources that are going into serving the homeless are beneficial. The Council Committee on Homelessness, the ad hoc committee, there were 6 areas of focus that they wanted to direct their attention towards. And one is utilizing a regional approach. Secondly is to build a robust education and outreach program. Third is to continue supporting homeless programs and services through our city-funded grant programs as well as federal grant dollars that we receive. Maintaining public spaces and facilities to the highest standards. Pursuing additional affordable housing opportunities, and strengthening the city's response to homelessness through various administrative actions. And so on my last slide, I'll just cover some of the progress that has been made to date, and then I'll turn it over to the panel. Collaboration, cooperation, and support at the local level are key to addressing this crisis. In the spirit of collaboration, the Ventura County City Managers Group created a regional memorandum of understanding to address homelessness through regional cooperation. So while not binding, the MOU asks that each city develop strategies, actively participate in the coordinated entry system, pursue permanent housing, and condition those entities that are receiving funding from the various cities to participate in the homeless management information system. As part of our outreach and education campaign, you're here today, so we have this community conversation on homelessness. We have a robust website with resources available and what the city's doing, what we can and cannot do to address homelessness. We also have recently developed a resource brochure, so if you know anyone experiencing homelessness, that this brochure is available to share. And then, as you heard in the video, there's also an anti-panhandling campaign. And so you'll start to see these signs here about don't give change, but help create it. And so if you're able, we're asking that you donate to the organizations, and there are links on the city's website for you to be able to connect with some of our local service providers, MANA, Lutheran Social Services, Harbor House, and there's others on the website. And you can go directly to their websites and make a donation. We also have a dedicated staffing resource. So the city is budgeted for 381 positions. We did not add a position. What we do here is once a position is vacated, we look at that position to see if it's, we still need it in the same capacity, or could we use it to address a different priority. And so again, with this being a priority of the City Council, we have a dedicated staffing resource for homelessness. Her name is Ashley Humes. She's somewhere out here today. There she is in the corner. Ashley is our neighborhood and social services liaison. And so her role is to follow this issue, to become as educated as possible, to work with our city council committee, to work with our local organizations, and really get a good handle on what homelessness looks like in Thousand Oaks and how we can effectively respond as a community. We also continue to support our local nonprofit organizations. We've had convenings with our faith community, and we have also strengthened our enforcement capabilities, and our police chief and our city attorney will go into more detail on that. So these recommendations were presented to the full city council in just October of 2018, and so this is what we've been able to accomplish to date. We know that there's more work to do, but I just thought it was important to share with the group just to let you know that this is a priority again for the City Council and for the city, and we are doing what we can to address this issue. Thank you.
By the way, this is, I think, being hosted on Facebook Live. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Wonderful. You're famous. Folks, just to let you know how this committee served to open my eyes and Councilmember Bill de la Peña, there were many misconceptions I had in regards to homelessness, and a number of folks, it's interesting because as the council, we receive complaints either not helping the homeless enough or helping them too much, and it runs the spectrum. And it doesn't mean anyone corners the market on compassion. If you're concerned about homeless on your streets and your property values, that doesn't mean you lack compassion. And for those who would want to help the homeless in a greater capacity, that doesn't mean you own the market on compassion. I think as a community, we're here, common unity, to find solutions to this. And some of the areas where it was confusing to me that this panel helped with, and what we're hoping will do the same for you, I didn't understand some of the federal and state rulings that have handcuffed us as a community, especially the Boise ruling, Jones versus the City of Los Angeles, that you cannot prohibit the homeless from sleeping on public property. and also enforcement issues. We faced all of these. So when you hear the panel speak today, you're going to be just like me and Claudia in that you're going to have misconceptions cleared up, but you're also maybe going to have questions that we did for this panel. So listen to what they're sharing because they're experts in each of these fields. Write your question accordingly to the folks that can answer it, and they will. And this is what we're doing today. We as a community need to wrap our mind around this. And you've heard ideas on solutions. Not all of us are in agreement on those solutions. We're not coming to a conclusion today. This is for all of us to gain understanding and work through this. So our first panel presenter is Chief Tim Hagel, Police Chief of Thousand Oaks. He was born and raised in the Conejo Valley. Chief Hagel's been in the Sheriff's Department since 1987. That's when I graduated from college. You've been around since Colonel Sanders was a corporal.
I know.
Yeah.
We rode horses down Thousand Oaks Boulevard. No, we really rode horses down Thousand Oaks Boulevard.
I was thinking dinosaurs and you fell off and broke your wooden underwear. So he oversees a unit of 2 deputies that deal with our vulnerable population. They're both our officers. Come on up here, guys. Just let them see you.
Juan, Josh, come on
Juan
up.
and
Let them
Josh.
see your faces here. Come on up. Josh.
Where did he go? There he is. As Claudia pointed out, these 2 men probably, you talk about social pathology, they can put a face and a name to every circumstance that our vulnerable population has faced. They're out there with compassion, enforcing the law, but also caring for humanity. An amazing gift to this community, and to both of you, I want to say thank you so very much on behalf of the city.
Thank you, guys. Josh, Juan, thank you. And once the panel's done today, you'll see that they were out there earlier. A lot of you probably didn't know their function. Maybe you hadn't seen their faces before, but they'll be available to ask any questions. If you have a question that you want to ask, everyone has a question to ask a cop. Don't ask them about the speeding ticket you got on the 101, okay? Ask them about homelessness.
Chief Hagel, just to remind the panel, 5 minutes. At 6 minutes, we're getting concerned. At 7, we're going to hook you.
Okay,
Right,
American
so
Idol.
take over.
Here's what I want to do. I want to go over the most common questions that I get on a daily basis. And that is the phone calls and emails that come in on a daily basis on the law enforcement aspects. A lot of the times they'll start with the council. Someone will email or call or write a letter to the council or straight to the police department. Let's go. This is like a TV show. Number 1 question I get. How come all the other cities around have laws against homelessness and people sleeping and camping? They have the laws. Why don't you write your law like them? Because theirs is illegal. It's not constitutional. It's the bottom line. So the city attorney is going to talk about the legalities. We have to comply, whether we like it or not. We have to comply with the Ninth Circuit Court, period. So is wrestling horses and spitting on the sidewalk and other laws that were put on the books 100 years ago. They're still there on many of the books. Doesn't mean you can enforce them. So what occurred here in the late spring into the early summer where Thousand Oaks passed an anti-camping ordinance that meets all the requirements of the Ninth Circuit Court, means it's legal. That allows law enforcement to enforce that, and we do. The sleeping doctrine that comes with that, the city attorney will talk about, is a partner in that, and that's dictated to us by the Ninth Circuit Court. So I'll let her talk about that. So if you walk away from anything and you say, well, my cousin lives in city X and it's only 25 miles away, and look, I photocopied it, it's against the law for someone to sleep on the city. It's unconstitutional, most likely. So that's the most important thing, is to find out if they're complying with the Ninth Circuit Court. The next are some interesting intricacies about the homelessness. The mayor talked about that the vast majority are local, organic, homegrown homeless. These are people that you went to school with, down and out. These aren't actors that were in there. These are the 300 plus people that Juan and Josh talk to every day of the week, all day long. We track, you're going to see this next question is, well, how come you say there's 271 homeless today, but the county says maybe there's 90 or 110? That's because, remember, that's a point in time and count in 1 day or 2 days. We take a 1 week period, we shake every bush there is. Juan and Josh personally conduct that survey. They know every homeless person by face and name, because they're the ones that get the calls from the homeless relatives that might be in New York, Manitoba, San Diego. Could you check on my brother? Could you check on my mom? I don't live in the area anymore. I heard they're sleeping in this culvert or such. Our turnover rate for our homeless in the Conejo Valley is about 43% a year. What does that mean? That means that Josh and Juan talk to about 43% new people on the streets a year, and 43% are gone. Where do they go to? They go to housing, they go to available location shelters that all of these providers, they move on to other cities in a fluid type state. Our actual population goes up and down and varies about 10% a year. When you take the totality of 2018 was 245 homeless in town, and when you take the totality of 2019, it's 271. Okay, that's not that big of a change, I think we could all agree. But in that 271, they flipped over 43%. 43% have flipped over. I think that's something we need to pay attention to in the future. So I talked about the Boise decision. I talked about our camping laws. They're stringent. I can't thank you enough as the police department, for the council, the city attorney, and the community. We have been enforcing since July 1. This law is simple. You're not putting your tent up on a sidewalk like the 50,000 in Los Angeles. It's not happening, okay? That's the law. To do that, we have to allow you the basic accoutrements of sleeping, and the city attorney will cover that. And then finally, the third most common call I get is about this person has so much accumulation. They got 3 shopping carts. They got all this gear piled up, and it's getting larger and larger in their homeless camp. You saw the video today. A weird side aspect, and I'm not a behavioral health specialist, but I know enough from boots on the ground in 35 years that hoarding is a side effect of being homelessness. And I think any one of you could process the many reasons why. So when we go in and clean out their camps, and you say, what are you doing? The camp is filled. Yeah, we go clean them out weekly, and it comes back, but hoarding is an unintended consequence of being homeless. With that, Mayor, I'd like to pass it along. Well, did I make it?
You did it.
Okay.
Well done, Chief.
Yay.
Our next speaker is our city attorney, Tracy Noonan. She's been practicing law for over 20 years, 11 of those right here in the city. She's an amazing gift to this community, and she's been instrumental in taking these federal mandates, these laws, and working in such a capacity that we can retain our autonomy, and she's fighting legally on behalf of the citizens of this community. So Tracy, take it away. Let's welcome Tracy Noonan.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This is on. Thank you. So I'm just going to try to, since we only have 5 minutes and I thought I had 10.
I'll give you 7.
All right.
All right, you got 8. Go ahead.
Deal. All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about the case that the mayor and the police chief keep talking about, Martin versus the city of Boise, Idaho. It's a 9th Circuit Court of Appeal case. So this decision affects not just every city in the state of California, but it actually affects every city in 9 states throughout the United States. That includes Nevada, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, etc. And what it did, the facts of the case are pretty simple. There were multiple homeless individuals who were cited for camping on public property or sleeping in public buildings. And it violated Boise's anti-camping sleeping ordinances. The 9th Circuit, the persons who were cited filed a civil rights lawsuit against the city of Boise challenging the ordinance. And the 9th Circuit Court of Appeal held that the ordinance, which criminalized the act of sleeping outside where there was no sleeping space practically available, violates those persons' 8th Amendment rights against cruel and unusual punishment. The court stated that Boise's ordinance punished persons for the fundamental biological need to sleep. Therefore, if a person has no place to sleep, they can't be cited for sleeping on public property. Now, the most important thing that a lot of people aren't talking about is that there is discussion in the case that says that this decision does not mean that cities can never regulate the act of camping or sleeping. And in fact, the court recognized that there might be some limitations that a city can impose. So that brings us to the city's sleeping and camping ordinances. In fact, we've had these ordinances on the books for a few decades. However, based on the Boise case, we needed to amend it because our previous ordinances did not make the distinction between camping and sleeping. Again, sleeping is a fundamental biological right, camping is not. So in May, we amended our ordinances to make that clear distinction. And what does that do? What does that allow the city to do? First of all, by amending these ordinances and making that distinction, we are able to, and we do, prohibit the act of camping on any city-owned property. Any city property throughout the entire city, you cannot camp. In other words, you cannot pitch a tent in front of City Hall. You cannot pitch a tent on a sidewalk in a residential neighborhood. You cannot pitch a tent in any city-owned open space. We also were able to place what's called time, place, and manner restrictions on the act of sleeping. So as the mayor previously mentioned, we limit the act of sleeping on public property between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. So between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m., we can prohibit you from sleeping on public property during those hours. We also can prohibit someone from sleeping anywhere throughout the city if that person has a place to go. In other words, if we have a shelter or they have a relative who says, hey, I'm willing to take this person in, or a nonprofit organization has some money that they can provide them to get them into a hotel. So if there's a place for this person to go, then we can prohibit them from sleeping on public property. The other thing that we did was we also redefined the definition of public property. Prior to our revisions to the ordinance, we included, or public property also included private property that was open to the public, like shopping centers. We specifically eliminated that part of the definition, and by doing that, we are now allowing property owners, private property owners, to determine how they want to regulate their own property. So these changes were very important for the city of Thousand Oaks because, again, under the Boise case, if you don't make the distinction between sleeping and camping, you run the risk of violating a person's fundamental right to sleep, their civil rights. So we were the first city in the county that actually amended our ordinance to make that distinction so that we can actually regulate the act of sleeping and regulate the act of camping. Those cities that do not change their ordinances to comply with Boise do run the risk, if they do enforce anyone sleeping or camping on their property, they run the risk of a civil rights lawsuit against them. Just for a little bit of information, the city of Boise has petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court for review of it. We don't know whether the U.S. Supreme Court will grant cert. They grant cert for a very small percentage of cases that they're requested to hear. The city of Thousand Oaks has joined a consortium of other cities, including like the city of Ventura and the county of LA, to draft what's called an amicus brief to support the U.S. Supreme Court granting cert in the case. The second thing I want to talk about, do I still have time? Okay. The second thing I want to talk about is how do we enforce this? You heard a little bit from the police chief. How do we go about enforcing these laws that are on our books? First of all, as I think it's pretty clear to us, our goal, and my goal, is to always look at our law enforcement capabilities as a compassionate tool. It is a tool that we have, but we need to use it compassionately. And the second thing I really want to hit home today is that filing criminal charges will never solve the issue of homelessness. It just won't do it. And there's a lot of reasons why. First and foremost, it's not a crime to be homeless. I would beg you to ask the police chief or our vulnerable populations officers how many calls they get regularly because a person who may be homeless is hanging out in a park or standing on a street corner. It's not a crime to do that. They have the same rights as you and me to be in the park, to be walking down the street. It's not a crime. And it's not illegal to ask for money. You heard from our assistant city manager, Ingrid, about how we think that from our perspective, you would be better off donating your spare change to a nonprofit organization that can really help them. But at the end of the day, it's not illegal to ask someone for money. Panhandling is not illegal. You have First Amendment rights to do that. The third thing is that when you look at from the court's perspective, these city laws that we have on our books are just not high priorities under the court's jurisdiction. Remember that judges every day are hearing cases about murder and child abuse and rape, and there are very limited judicial resources. I recently learned that our judges have one of the highest dockets, in other words, number of cases, of any courthouse in the state of California. They have a very high number of cases they have to contend with. So for me to cite someone for drinking in public or sleeping on public property, for the most part, they're not that significant when compared to the other crimes that are happening in the county. But they can be just as time-consuming as criminal cases. And just as a recent example, last year, my office filed a criminal charge for camping in our open space. That case took 3 days, 3-day jury trial. That's 3 days that the courthouse was not available for any other cases, 3 days that the public defender could not work on any other cases, and 3 days that my attorney, who is the only attorney who prosecutes every single criminal case in my city, she was in court for 3 days. So it's a very time-consuming effort to enforce our ordinances. The other thing that we need to remember is that jails are very crowded. So if someone is arrested, 9 times out of 10, they're out within a couple of hours. We're not going to impose fines because they don't have money to pay fines. So I ask myself, what are we trying to accomplish? Again, we're trying to look at our law enforcement tools as just that. They are tools, but our goal is to get them to social services and get them to the organizations who can really provide help and assistance. All right. Was that under 10?
Well done.
Nice.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
There's 2 ways to look at panhandling, and I remember a professor once telling me there's feeling good and doing good. It feels good to assuage your struggle and give somebody money out the window. It feels good. But does it do good? Do good's harder. It requires more than just a simple passing act of compassion that really didn't cost you much other than putting your arm out the window. Doing good requires more. And oftentimes the feeling good creates a bigger problem. And this rises all the way up to the county level. And this is where we now have Tara Caruth, who is the Ventura County Continuum of Care, COC, and she's a program manager for the County Executive Office. She's been doing that since 2014. She's managed local, state, and federal funding for homeless services while providing staff support to the COC. Her work experience includes nonprofit, healthcare, research, and social services, and is focused on improving systems of care for vulnerable populations. We're working with the county because, especially for federal funding and county funding, if there's a solution to the housing issue, we have to work in conjunction because of housing prices. But oftentimes those come with constraints. So this is a relationship that we're building and developing, and Tara will give you great insights from the county level and what they're doing to unify our efforts countywide. So please welcome Tara.
Thank you so much. I would also like to let you all know that I'm also a Thousand Oaks resident. So this issue is, while I have a county lens, I live in this community and care about this issue tremendously. As Mayor McCoy mentioned, I manage what's called the Continuum of Care. So when Ingrid mentioned the homeless count, a lot of these federally mandated activities that happen in our community are related to the funding that is managed out of my office. The Continuum of Care is a regional planning group. It's HUD funding that comes with these expectations that you have regional planning efforts, that you coordinate your service delivery system and get participation from all the service providers in using the same performance measures that are tracked in a client-level database called the Homeless Management Information System. All of our committee meetings and our board meetings and our larger alliance, any of our efforts are open to the public. I encourage you to look at our website. I think the city links to that as well, but it's venturacoc.org, and you can get involved in those efforts, and we are always trying to get more East County participation. So in addition to managing federal funding, we're also now, the Continuum of Care is receiving funding from the state as they're making more resources available focused on this growing crisis across the state. When we're funding programs and services, we're making data-driven decisions. We are involving stakeholders from various service programs, law enforcement, business community, faith partners, city leaders, and others to participate in that so that we're making the best community-wide decisions. We're addressing homelessness as a regional issue, as Ingrid mentioned, aligning that county-wide MOU and partnership to get all of our cities and the county participating and aligning some of our strategies so that we're moving forward together and not conflicting and causing more confusion among our service providers and the people that are seeking assistance in our community. We've talked a lot about what causes homelessness, what populations we're seeing, and I would say that the number one reason that we're seeing an increase in homelessness across the state and our community is housing affordability. If you have even looked to rent a room in our community, it is well over $1,000 a month. Someone who's on fixed income of Social Security or disability income or even making a minimum wage is really challenged to find an affordable housing unit. Some of the programs that we are funding, we're focused on creating an effective crisis response system. And as I listen to the police chief and city attorney talk, one of the challenges we have are places for people to go indoors so that we aren't addressing the challenges on the streets. We have limited but growing number of emergency shelters across the community. As many of you likely know, Conejo Valley has a winter warming shelter program, but does not have a year-round shelter program. There are some other limited resources across the county, and the Ventura County Rescue Mission is also here and a partner that does serve people county-wide. It is sometimes challenging to convince someone to come from Thousand Oaks and go to Oxnard for shelter, and that's one of the challenges in utilizing those resources. The biggest focus on state and federal funding right now is focusing on permanent housing programs. Housing is the only thing that ends homelessness. People do need a lot of support services, and that varies depending on what their individual needs are, but housing is the only solution to ending homelessness. LSS and Harbor House are providing outreach and day services and a program that we fund called Rapid Rehousing. Rapid Rehousing is short to medium term rental assistance, helping get people back in a unit. Sometimes that's renting a room because that's the best we can come up with, and supporting them so they can stabilize and stay housed. We're finding that our resources are able to serve fewer and fewer people because people need longer subsidies because the rent is so high. We also fund permanent supportive housing, which is permanent housing for people with disabilities, and an example of that being provided in the Thousand Oaks area is mini mansions. In addition, we are coordinating with all of our service providers, including our county agencies. Ventura County Behavioral Health is currently partnering with law enforcement in many of our cities, including Thousand Oaks, where they're doing direct outreach to try to connect homeless and housed people with mental illness to appropriate services. We're also working with the Whole Person Care Program out of the healthcare agency, which is providing outreach and services to the highest utilizers of healthcare services and other publicly funded services to help better coordinate and move them towards housing solutions. We have a variety of other agencies, both at the county and nonprofit agency, that participate in this wraparound services attempt to support people as they move towards a housing solution. The Human Services Agency has a dedicated homeless service program at the county where they're providing homeless prevention and rapid rehousing programs. I would again mention that our homeless prevention efforts are sometimes challenged to intervene early enough because of state and federal rules associated with that funding, and once someone becomes homeless, it's much more challenging to reconnect them to housing. There are more resources coming available from the state focused on outreach services, emergency shelter, and housing. Maximizing use of these funds is a great opportunity for Ventura County and Thousand Oaks to move more people off the streets. The programs and services that we do fund are effective. More than 95% of people who are exited into a housing resource stay housed, keeping folks housed with all of these service providers.
You're going to have to put a caboose on the train here.
Yeah.
We're coming.
On the what?
Nothing.
Okay. Okay. So get involved. Check out our website, and thank you so much.
I know your time is
This
precious,
happens
folks,
to
and
me
we want to
often.
make sure that you get plenty of opportunity to ask questions.
Thank
So
you.
are you okay with that? We're good, Tara?
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is going to be Jennifer Schwabauer, and she's with MANA, which before she speaks, I wanted to recognize, and I forgot to do that earlier, some of our elected officials who are present. Councilmember Jones, Ed Jones, Councilmember Bob Engler's here. I'm not sure if Al Adam got here. And then also we have Nancy Frawley from Assemblywoman Jackie Irwin's office, and also I think there's someone here from Henry Stern's office. So thank you for coming. And the reason why I share that is because Councilmember Engler is part of MANA, and this is what Jennifer does. She's been serving this community for quite some time. She's the executive director since 2012, and she's got a lot of great insights. So I'm going to shut up and take over. You're up.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here for this very important discussion. MANA as an organization comes to this topic from a different side angle. Our goal is to prevent homelessness. And we do that through our food pantry by providing low income and families and seniors, disabled people with hundreds of dollars worth of foods throughout the month so that they can use those financial resources in other ways, like paying for rent or gas for their car in order to get to work. And we do this through cooperation with the community. We have a very well-stocked pantry that is provided by most organizations, churches, businesses here in the Caneo Valley. Last year, we collected over 350,000 pounds of food, which is about 275,000 meals worth of food. And so we're in, thank you. Thank all of you, actually. And we also partner with retailers, grocery stores, and things like that to bring in a wide variety of both perishable and non-perishable foods that we can give out to our families. My goal personally has always been to make an impact. And by the way you can do that is give a family enough food to sustain them for a good length of time. Our pantry is open 3 days a week. Families can come once a month, but they're going to get a heaping shopping cart full of food, and that's going to be, you know, fruits and vegetables and dairy products and frozen meat, and then a wide variety of canned goods and boxed goods like spaghetti and spaghetti sauce and things like that. And so the pantry is our main program that we use to help people. We also have a program that we call 60 Days of Holiday, and that is an additional program to the pantry visit, and it's November 1st through the end of December, and it's holiday-related items so that those families can celebrate their holidays however they choose. And then we also have an emergency brown bag program for situations if someone's been evicted or a mom is fleeing domestic violence or something like that. So as I said, our goal is to make that kind of a huge impact. I do want to clarify, since I have this great audience here, that MANA does not actually serve the homeless, and that is for a couple of reasons. Primarily, we are not situated to handle the services that a homeless person or a homeless family needs, and that would be case management, any kind of health or rental assistance, things like that. We are strictly food related. I know it seems a simple thing that, okay, well, you can give them someone a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter and send them on their way, but remember, our goal is to make an impact. And we don't think that little Band-Aid effect is an impact. The other reason is that the majority of foods that we have either need to be refrigerated, frozen, or cooked in some way. Having said that, though, we define housed very loosely because we don't want to make people's lives any more difficult than they already are. If you are living in your motorhome, you're renting a room, you're renting a motel room, staying with friends, anything like that where you have access to refrigeration and cooking facilities, we will consider you to be housed. Like I said, we define that very loosely. And just to give you a few statistics, there's over 15,000 food insecure households here in Thousand Oaks, and any one of those families could slide into homelessness at any moment if they have a financial crisis of some kind. So, like I said, our goal is to prevent homelessness. 85% of the families that we serve are actually employed. Some of them have 2 or 3 jobs, but they are employed, and the balance of the families we serve or the people that we serve are either seniors living on fixed incomes, which is a growing issue, and then also disabled people who are unable to work. Some of the things that we look at when we kind of track trends in hunger, and I'm going to talk a little bit about hunger, is the number of seniors that are living just on Social Security and how that translates into their ability to pay for rent or pay for medication and kind of keep their life going. So that's a growing demographic in our area, especially as our population ages, and if they do not have a lot of retirement funding, then it becomes an issue. The other demographic that we're watching very carefully that could easily, and actually has in the past, slid into a homeless situation is people my age that are taking care of elderly parents. Most of them come out of the workforce, sometimes very gainfully employed, but they've left their job in order to take care of mom and dad in their older years, only to burn through all of their financial resources taking care of mom and dad. And so mom and dad go off to a better place, and the adult child is now, over 60 at this point, usually the clients that we have right now, and they're left destitute because they've used their 401k, any retirement plan they have, any financial, some of them have sold their houses, and now they're renting rooms and technically, housed, but they are homeless because they don't have their own home anymore. And as many of the panelists have said, some of the challenges are the increasing in the housing costs, the rental costs, and things like that. As MANA moves forward as an organization and as we continue to work on our new facility, some of the programs that we anticipate having are going to be trying to put people on a good track to prevent homelessness and get them to understand that how things they do at a young age may be able to transition into their adult lives that would be very beneficial to them.
Maybe a 30-second last thought.
Pardon?
Maybe a 30-second last thought.
Thank you. I was done.
Well, on behalf of the city, we're grateful for MANA, and thank you for all you do. And that brings us to our last panelist, and I wanted to save Denise for last because I've really enjoyed working with her and getting to know her. And Denise was working for LSS and then started Harbor House, so now we have two entities working in the community. This is a new nonprofit, new local nonprofit serving the experience, people experiencing homelessness, persons living in extreme poverty. And Denise has been part of the Conejo Valley for quite some time. Welcome. Let's welcome Denise. Good day.
Thank you, Mayor. Harbor House is a new nonprofit. We created this agency out of a great need for a local nonprofit that was run and funded here in the community, who spends our money and our donations and our energy here in the local community. It's not going to other counties or other cities anywhere. It's staying right here where people live and donate. We are working with people who are housed but living in extreme poverty. Like Jennifer, I think a lot of people don't realize how incredibly expensive homelessness is. So for us to keep people who are housed is crucial. It's absolutely crucial. So a lot of what we do is emergency assistance to people who are really living on the edge, because we want to keep them housed. That's important. That's a lot of what we do. And we work with those who are currently homeless. We know the local poor. We know them by name, we know their stories, and we know their worries. In the Conejo Valley, we deal with anywhere, the number fluctuates, like Chief Hagel said, anywhere from 250 to 300 homeless people is what we see every week. And what we do is we find them living in cars. We have learned that most of them do not have cars, or their cars are broken down and they can't afford to get them fixed, and so they're on bikes or they're walking. They sleep in our parks, on benches, or wherever they can find a quiet, safe place. Harbor House provides a hot meal 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with the help of over 700 volunteers and lots of churches in our community. This is made possible because there's so many people that seem to care about this issue. We provide emergency assistance and case management to each of these homeless that are looking for it. Not everybody is. Some people just want to be fed, but those who are looking for case management and looking to move forward, we're willing to provide that. Case management in our book is the thing that creates the most change. That's where people's lives will change, when someone walks alongside of them and helps people navigate very difficult systems. These are very, very difficult systems. We're currently concerned about a rising number of aging homeless. We have a 78-year-old gentleman who worked for many years locally here in Thousand Oaks. He retired and he was living on a very comfortable, simple but comfortable Social Security. He was living in the same apartment for decades. And when the apartment had an electrical problem and the apartment burned to the ground, he lost everything he owned. Everything he owned turned to ashes, and that's what he has remaining. The stress of all that was so great that he had a massive stroke. And so now he's currently living in his car with his walker, and he is homeless. He gets a Social Security, but it isn't enough to bail him out of this very difficult situation. We also have a 79-year-old woman who's living in a car. We had to help her recently because her car is so old that her windows would no longer go up or down. She has cancer and she struggles every day, but her Social Security is so little that it's very hard for me to envision a time when she will not be living in her car. It is impossible to live on $700, $800, or $900 a month Social Security in the city of Thousand Oaks. We also work with a lot of young people, and as Ingrid said earlier, a lot of kids who have aged out of foster care into homelessness. They just have kind of wandered out there, they just happened there. And right now we're actually working with a brother and sister who are living in an apartment by themselves. They both are working full-time jobs. He's still a senior in one of our local high schools, so he's going to school but trying to work full-time. Their mother left them to go live with a boyfriend, and they struggle every month to pay the rent on their apartment. The young boy confided to me recently that they're so worried about making their monthly rent that they were considering living in the sister's car. We have lots of families with children in our local Conejo Valley Unified School District, and they live in their cars. And these children stop on their way to school at a local gas station, and they wash their face and they brush their teeth and they get ready for school and they show up. And as the mother of 4 grown children, I cannot imagine how any child goes into a classroom every morning and sits among their peers, working so hard to keep the secret of where and how they're living. I personally feel very strongly that homelessness is the human rights issue of our time. That's my personal opinion. I believe that my children's children will read about homelessness, the current homelessness. I believe my children's children will read about it in history books in the future. And what I fear is that they'll look at me and ask, where were you? Where did you stand? What did you say? And what did you do? And I want to be on the right side of history. I want to say that although we work 12, 15-hour days working boots on the ground with the homeless, I can tell you that there are so few people that I meet out there in need that are scammers. And for some reason, there's kind of this sense about them that people are feigning this poverty or feigning their circumstances, that they're faking us. And I want you to know that in the years I've been doing this, that has not been my experience. These people are real, and their stories are traumatic. And I just want to say on a very personal level, from Harbor House, from our staff and all of our volunteers, I am so thrilled that you all are here today, because it really shows the city and the population and the people that we live among. So I'm very happy that you're all here today. Thanks, Mayor.
All right, folks. Well, first of all, thank you for filling these out. You've heard the panel. We're going to have some questions from the audience. Well, let me just correct that, from the citizens of the community. And you're the ones who are here to gain understanding and ask questions. So you all put your names on there. I appreciate it. You gave your question to the specific individual that was listed on the back. We have a number of them and limited time, but we're going to go through these. Chief, I'm going to start with you. Here's one. Tracy, do I need to state the person's name, or should I just keep it?
No. You can do whatever you want.
I wouldn't state
that. Yeah, we'll leave it alone.
Whatever you want.
All right. We like to know that you're real, and that's good. So the question is for you, Chief. It says, I see increasing numbers of homelessness in the parking lot of the TO library. I see them smoking marijuana in the parking lot, sitting in their cars, and starting to set up an encampment 15 feet off the parking lot at the hitching post right near the library entrance. Can police stop this encampment, and will they, especially smoking marijuana on city property?
Yes, I think you all heard him there. The answer is yes, 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 and yes. Both of our vulnerable population officers have been working with library staff. We're seeing an increase of day visitors in their cars at the library parking lot. So you'll see people that are living in their cars at nighttime on the city streets because the parking lot there is closed at night to the public. There's no business going on in the library. So then during the daytime, these folks are starting to congregate in their cars in the library areas, sitting in their cars. Humans, we like to congregate and socialize. That's how humans are. That's why we have survived eons together. So it is on our radar screen right there. It is against the law to smoke marijuana in public. So we have zero tolerance on those. Remember, we respond. They do walkthroughs through there every day, and we respond to the calls by the library staff. So if you see an illegal activity in the parking lot of the library, call us and we'll come.
Thanks, Chief. This one is, well, it goes to you, but Chief Hagel, but I think it's all of us, and it's just a simple question. Do any of us personally know someone who is homeless? And the answer is yes here. Yes, yeah. You've served, yeah. Of course.
I have a family member that's homeless.
And everyone can say yes on the panel? Okay.
Yeah.
We can move on. Thank you for the question. I guess we qualify now. The next one is, this will be to Tracy, our attorney. How about they open the old vacant Kmart building as a homeless shelter for strictly Conejo Valley homeless since it's been vacant for so long?
It's a really good question. So you heard me talk about constitutional rights, right? So we have this other U.S. constitutional right called the Fifth Amendment. And what that says is that we cannot take property without paying just compensation. So the Kmart site is actually owned by a private property owner. And they, I was actually writing notes about the need for more housing and how does the city, how is the city involved in ensuring that affordable housing is built. And so I wrote down, first of all, you need a willing property owner who's willing to build affordable housing. And it's really hard to find that because it is so expensive to build affordable housing. I'm not sure how many of you are aware, but we used to have this program called redevelopment agencies. And in redevelopment agencies, we actually had to use 20% of every dollar that we received to build affordable housing, but that was abolished by the state in 2009. And that funding source dried up, and since then, cities throughout the state of California do not have those funding resources now to assist with the construction of affordable housing. So with respect to Kmart in particular, though, first of all, you need a willing property owner who wants to build affordable housing, and it really is up to them what they want to do.
Can I chime in on that?
Sure.
I just want to chime in on this quickly because I think it's great that some of you believe that we can build something that is affordable to help the homeless. But you would be surprised that we do have residents who don't even want a low-income apartment in their neighborhood. So if residents don't want low income, which means a family making $80,000 a year, that's the deputy, that's your teacher, that's your firefighter. They don't want that housing in their neighborhood. How do you think they will react to, say, permanent housing for homeless?
All right. This is, you can write it down if you'd like. All right, Tara Caruth, this is for you. How can students help make a difference?
Students? Yes. I love that question. That is a great question. We have a lot of students that are engaging, especially around our youth initiatives, really trying to, so we're working on finding community meeting times that work well for students. So if you are a student, please reach out to me if you're interested in getting engaged. We do have opportunities for you to participate.
Perfect. This is Chief, either you or Tracy. It says, where can homeless people sleep? The city made a decision, Park or Canyon, the city made a decision about where homeless can sleep. Did the city provide porta potty and hand washing and trash cans at these locations?
You want me to answer?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll finish up whatever.
Yeah, you'll finish up. All right, so when we talk, that was one thing I didn't have time to cut out of my little speech because I had limited time, but when we're talking about public property, we're talking about city-owned public property. So public property that's owned by the state or our school district or our park and rec district, our sleeping and camping ordinances do not apply to that. They are separate legal entities and they have the ability to regulate their own property. When it comes to city property, however, we specifically prohibit it in any open space throughout the city. And that is because of significant public safety concerns that we have with anyone sleeping in our open space. We're coming out of less than a year after significant wildfires. And so we want to ensure that we don't have anyone sleeping in open space. We want to protect the open space, both the biological and ecological habitats. We also want to protect anyone who is in the open space. And we certainly don't want any more wildfires. So that's one area that you cannot sleep. You can't camp and you cannot sleep. With respect to the rest of the city-owned property, between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., as long as you are not impeding vehicular or pedestrian movement. In other words, you're not sleeping across the sidewalk, so someone has to walk into the street to get around you. Between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., if there's no other place for you to go, you have the right to sleep on that city property. Is that not what they asked?
So sanitation, so sanitation. So our officers, you saw the video of the camps here in town. Those are camps that our two officers are in all day long, every day. there is no sanitation devices inside of those camps. So the answer is there is none.
Okay. This one seems to have been answered earlier. With so much available office space in Newbury Park, is there a possibility of opening a homeless shelter in that area? We answered that. It deals with private property and the like. And then afterwards, folks, if you want further, we'll be here so you can talk with us afterwards. But there's a ton of questions, so I'm going to do my best to get through them. This one is for Tara. There are a diverse number of reasons for homelessness, so there needs to be a diverse solution. How can we bring the services that exist to the people who need them? Tara.
So we are, you are absolutely correct, diverse solutions for diverse challenges, and no individual is the same. So we are trying to outreach, getting more people on the streets to engage with folks, partnering with law enforcement. That includes behavioral health and our nonprofit agencies, healthcare services, youth-focused. We are always open to ideas, but we're trying to make more services field-based to engage with folks on the streets.
Can I close that one up
Yes,
with you?
please.
Okay. So you heard Denise earlier say, what does everybody homeless need? Housing. I don't think there's anybody in this room, no matter what side you're on, that would disagree to say that every American, every resident in our society, in our community, needs a roof over their head. I've never heard, no one's ever called me up at the police station and said, don't give them a roof over their head. So when you hear us say housing, 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 yes, they need that, but they need the wraparound services is the fancy term of what they're talking about. If I talk to, we have people in the audience here that are specialists helping Juan and Josh with the homeless have a high substance abuse rate, definitely higher than the regular population of residents. No one can argue against that. If I ask them, what do the homeless need? They say, substance abuse help. If I ask someone that's a specialty in food, although she did it eloquently, they need food. If it's a housing person, housing. If it's an employment specialist, they need jobs, or all of these. But the bottom line is what Tara and everyone's saying here, everyone needs a roof over their head. That alone doesn't do it. We have some that are service resistant. You go to take them to put a roof over their head, they can't handle it because they got to also lick the substance abuse problem, right? So you need that wraparound services all together. And that's the biggest thing you need to take away, is we need it all wrapped around together.
Thanks, Chief. This one is for the entire panel, but we're only going to ask one of you to respond. So whoever's super excited about it, jump in. Do we have an inventory of residents offering housing? A recommendation, all public agencies implement an awareness campaign to add inventory, like open rooms and the like. And I know they're doing that in a number of cities where citizens, do you understand the question? Because you look at me like you're a deer caught in headlights.
I can speak to this somewhat.
Okay, go ahead, Tara.
There is a county program called Home Share where it started targeted at seniors. And so if you were looking you had an extra room in your house and you needed help with something and needed a roommate, they would do screening. They still do this. They screen people and match them. The thing is we have significantly larger number of people seeking units to share than we have people offering units to share. So while I do think home sharing is absolutely one of the solutions that can work for people and help them be supported, we need more people who have a spare room willing to share, to offer that.
This question was already answered. What about those who don't want to leave a homeless lifestyle? And you were talking about resistance to help. So we've got so many that I'm going to try to get through these. Denise, this is for you. How do you tell the difference between a panhandler and a person in genuine need? Isn't it better to err on the side of real need?
Well, I don't make that judgment ever. That's not my call. But I would plead with everyone not to give money to panhandlers. It isn't helpful to them. And it isn't helpful to the city because the business owners are going to call Chief Hagel. He's going to call Josh and Juan and send them over there. It is a bad look, and it gives a bad name to the homeless, and the majority of them don't deserve that. And the majority of them are trying to work and try to get their life back on track. And so if you have spare change, I would suggest that you give it intentionally to organizations that are working really hard to affect real change.
Mayor McCoy, can I just chime in on that one too? Bing. Thanks. I think it's important for everybody to understand that, those of us that are in nonprofits, this is what we do day in and day out. We have resources that are not available to the general public. So when you give money to us, we can make it go so much farther than you ever imagine. And I don't know what the statistics are with the other panelists, but for MANA alone, for every dollar you give us, we can provide 8 meals worth of food. That's a tremendous impact on a family that's struggling. And it's much more impactful than you going out trying to buy enough food for eight meals to give to someone.
And I want to jump in. You can ask for the actual stories from the officers when you're done, but I lost track how many times in the last 4 years where I get a phone call from the officers that say, I have somebody, I can reunite them with their family lives in San Diego or New York or wherever, but I got to get them a bus ticket or a train ticket. Those officers are calling direct these nonprofits right here. I've seen it occur in a day where all of a sudden someone's getting an airline ticket or a bus ticket, not sending them to another city homeless, sending them to a family member or reuniting them. And that occurs by giving those dollars to these nonprofits.
All right. Chief, answer this one quick if you would. How do the police survey homeless encampments to identify criminal elements that are living and preying on the truly needy people? Who's supplying drugs to the homeless? Real quick.
Real quick, twice a year we do a count. It lasts about a week. We're just getting ready to do it. It is done with their unit, 24 hours a day for 1 week. I mentioned we have a high amount of substance abuse going on in the homeless population. So we do not recommend you to necessarily just okey doke walk into a homeless camp and say, hi, I'm here to help you. That's what these gentlemen do and the behavioral specialists. Yes, drugs are an issue in these camps, and that's what they do is deal with it.
Okay, and this is for Tracy, what is the current to the city position on supporting the Ninth Circuit Boise appeal, considering the recent LA County vote?
Right, so as I stated before, the city of Boise has filed a petition with the U.S. Supreme Court to review that decision, and the city of Thousand Oaks has joined a consortium of other cities to file what's called an amicus brief, basically a friend of the court brief, in support of the U.S. Supreme Court reviewing that case. Thank you.
This is for Ingrid and maybe Tara. Why did the count decrease, the HUD count decrease in 2017, and why not do the count more often?
This is always a challenging question. The point-in-time count is only as good as it's humans counting humans, so it's not exactly a perfect science. We do work really closely with all of our partners so that methodology is the same. I believe in 2017 there were some inclement weather events that happened directly before the count, and many of the encampment areas were vacant, and so there weren't people found as easily during that count, so that could have been some of that impact.
I'm not sure who to direct this one to. Ingrid, let me see if they actually put it on there. No, they didn't. Oh, boy. Well, good luck with this one. Ingrid, what do we need to do to get 250 units of housing with wraparound services in Thousand Oaks? Now you see why I signed up for the MC.
Ingrid, I spent a lot of time in court. Here's what you say. Could you repeat the question, please?
You want to take it, or yeah? Did you hear it? Do you want me to repeat it?
I did hear the question, and so thanks, Tim, for that protection.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I actually would throw that back to the city council.
All right.
And that is absolutely correct. It starts with a symposium like this one to help people understand the complexities of homelessness. Because if you continue with preconceived notions and all that, we're not going to really collectively solve the problem. The first step begins with education and outreach to the wider community.
250 units, you want to put that to the city to do. It's going to require an enormous amount of funding, increase in your sales tax. If that's something everyone wants to endure, that's where we would go with it. And folks, yeah, well, half of you are clapping loud and half of you are like, There's 167,000 people in the community, and there has to be an answer to this. We already have, some of the highest taxes in the country. And that's one of the reasons why, as we increase taxes, we have more homelessness. It creates poverty as well. Government's not real efficient at building these things, and there'd be folks on the panel who disagree with me in that. So I'm in agreement with Councilmember Bill de la Pena that this is why we're doing this. We have to figure out that solution, and that's a great question. Honestly, I don't have that easy answer. I'm not interested in taxing people into oblivion so they have to move out. I'm tired of that. I want people to stay in the city. So we're working on both. Let's see, oh gosh, I lost my track. It's no more questions. We're already overwhelmed. We'll be here all night. Can you compare what the mayor of San Diego has done with the homeless to our city thinking? Well, first of all, we don't have near the issue that the city of San Diego has. And they've got major problems on their hands, but they've done some innovative things. But that's not directed to me. That's you, Tracy. So thank God. Go ahead, Tracy.
Oh, okay. So one of the distinctions that I always look at when I look at what other cities in the state of California, in fact, quite honestly, it's throughout the entire United States, but just focusing on California, when I look at the programs and the resources that the larger cities have, Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, those resources, the access to resources for those larger cities that do have a higher homelessness population. The cities like Thousand Oaks and the cities in Ventura County, for the most part, do not have access to those resources. So we're looking at pennies on the dollar to try to find solutions to homelessness, where other cities have a lot more financial resources and a lot more access to other types of funding. One thing that I am very proud of, however, is our relationship with our nonprofit organizations. It really does require almost like a tri-partner relationship. It's got to be the city of Thousand Oaks partnering with our nonprofit organizations, and it has to be you. You as the residents and as a community need to support the nonprofit organizations in the cities in its endeavor to provide housing resources and other types of social service programs to our homeless population.
And Mayor, if I can just add one comment to that. Thank you, Tracy. In addition to our nonprofit organizations, I think the city of Thousand Oaks is very unique in that the number of houses of faith here that are actually contributing to the response to homelessness. And so they're doing a very good job of supporting Denise, supporting other local organizations, and responding to homelessness.
Denise, I'm going to give you two at a time to try to work through the pile here. First one is, outside of funding, and they actually tie together. Outside of funding, what do you think is the primary barrier to having affordable housing year-round, i.e. homeless shelters in Thousand Oaks? Is it NIMBY, not in my backyard, or some other issue? And then, in addition to that question, this person asked the best question of the day. How can I help?
Yes. I love that. Yeah. That is the question of the day. I would say to the first question, besides the funding, obviously we need funding for housing. It's just not going to be built by itself. We have to do that. And the other thing, I would say that their guests, I think you were reading their comment there about the not in my backyard. I would say that besides funding, that is the #1 issue that are not necessarily that we are facing, but that our homeless people are facing. If you ever visit next door, you'll see that while most people here are friends of the poor, there are many residents in Thousand Oaks who are not. And I hope that the ones who are really angry on next door are here so that they can hear some of the stories and know some of the truth. I think there's this idea that we're shipping people in from Watts and Compton and Santa Barbara, and they're not. These are our residents. These are people who have been evicted from their homes, who lived here and lived very good lives, and things just went awry, medical bills, tragedy, death of a spouse, just life happened to people. So I would say that people saying, not here, not in my backyard, send them someplace else besides funding, is the biggest problem that the homeless face today.
And I would agree with Denise. I'd like to bring an example that was presented to the ad hoc committee just last week, an example from Newport Beach. Newport Beach City Council approved a housing, not homeless shelter, but housing for the homeless with wraparound services among multi-million-dollar homes. How were they able to do it? It was providing services also for veterans. And the city council was faced with dozens of angry people opposing this development. They screamed, they were angry, not in my backyard. We don't want this type of housing in our neighborhood at all. Not until a veteran approached the microphone and said, I fought for you in Afghanistan. I was ready to give my life for you, and you don't want to give me housing. Council approved it 7-0.
And Rob, I didn't answer that wonderful question of the day. How can you help? Whoever you are, come to the Harbor House table afterward and we will nab you. We've got lots that you can do. So
and just
there's
to,
your answer.
Yeah, just to let you know, there's a number of folks who have said exactly the same thing.
Yes,
so thank you, everybody.
please.
All right, this will go to Tara and Denise. It's my understanding that there are a lot of young adults who are homeless as a result of aging out of the foster care system. How can the city help these people? And secondly, how many veterans, and Tara, you might be able to answer this, how many veterans are homeless in TO? You might be able to speak to Ventura, but give us a guesstimate. And Denise, you can jump on the first one too.
So the number of youth are rising. The number, and I will say there are some initiatives coming from the state and the federal government really focused on youth services. Some of the state funding, they're making a percentage of that funding needs to be available specifically for this transition age youth population. There are also some special housing vouchers that are coming available through HUD, targeting at helping these young people transition as they get some housing assistance and move into adulthood. The number of veterans in our point in time count has been a little deceiving because it's been going down. What the challenge has been is, at least in West County, most people had only been showing up in the service system during winter shelter, and now that we're getting some year-round programs, we're able to engage them and keep them engaged. So there are a total right now of 73 homeless veterans countywide that are actively engaged with our service providers in our system.
And I can jump in on that. I just remember something my dad told me as a kid. If you ever want to find out what's going on in a neighborhood, ask a kid in the sandbox. Hey, Juan, how many homeless vets do you deal with and help give services to on a weekly basis here in Thousand Oaks? 10 to 15 out of the 271. So that gives you a percentage. These are people that served our country.
I just want to add to the foster youth question. Before 2012, AB 2012, that we enacted where foster kids were allowed to age out later in life. Prior to that, kids were aging out at the age of 18, and for those of us who are parents, We know that there is not a child anywhere who reaches the age of 18 who's ready to just go out there and tackle the world. So these kids came out into the world with no high school education. They've got no high school diploma. They certainly don't have a minute of college. No one ever cared enough to teach them how to drive, so they don't drive, they ride a bike. They have no plan for their life because nobody cared to teach them how to make a plan. And so I would say that foster kids aging out today are faring a lot better than the kids prior to 2012, but they still are struggling.
I'll answer this one. Does the Constitution require Americans to have a roof over your head? The answer is no, but it also doesn't enforce your compassion either. So I don't know what the point of that. Lauren Lindquist, I know her, and so I got to say her name because this is cool. They live in Camarillo, and they work here and in nonprofit. And the question is, why do you think a Thousand Oaks resident, a homeless person, doesn't want to go to Oxnard for housing? Because there's this transition. So maybe, let's go Tara. Will you answer why that's always a conflict?
People really want to stay close to home. They're connected to people, to service organizations, to you. They see friendly faces. Those are all things that give people some level of comfort in their community. And to go into another city, especially on the streets, is really challenging. And people are often fearful of that. They're fearful of changing who their doctor is, who their case manager is, any of the things that we would be worried about if we moved from one place to another. So that's often what the reluctance is about.
One of the concerns of members of the community is we have homeless that are citizens of the United States, citizens of California. They're being denied housing services when non-citizens are having that provided. However you feel about that, that's a question of the community. Where is the money donated by donors intended to help the homeless going? Is there a priority in relation to that? And it looks like they put Denise, but Terry, you're smiling, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm smiling. So there are some federally funded programs where an adult who, or a non-citizen, a mixed status immigration household can live in that housing. That there has been some federal conversations that is changing, but that currently U.S. citizen children are eligible for housing assistance even if one of their parents aren't documented. But for most of our programs, it does actually require that you are a U.S. citizen to be eligible.
Okay. This one has to do with us granting $10,000 to Harbor House, and the other part was how Westlake Village spent their money, and that's none of my business. That's theirs. So.
Rob, I didn't hear you. Rob,
He's not asking it.
Oh, you're just reading.
Don't answer it. While I understand the anti-panhandling campaign, indirect giving is less personal and takes the personal compassion response away. How do you think we can respond person to person? Chief?
I can respond to this one because I use this anecdotally that when I talk to community groups. Sunday afternoon, there's going to be a big sports game on at 3 o'clock. You race over to Best Buy and buy a 79-foot television.
79 foot.
It's on sale today. 6 young lads and lasses help you strap it on top of your car. And you're so proud, and you have your kids inside the car, and you pull out of the parking lot. Everybody knows where Best Buy is, and everybody sees the 4 panhandlers on the 4 corners right out there. Why? Because you pull up with your car on, or your 79-foot television on top of the car, you feel what? As you look right there to your right, you're trying to not make eye contact, but your kids are. Mommy, is there something we can do to help? You're like, open the purse, here's $20, hand it out the window. It's guilt. Nobody wants to talk about it, folks, but it's this sense of guilt. So if you can hand it to them, you can sit around that night at the dinner table and say, we did something today. But you can't get that same feeling by give it to a nonprofit. What I tell people when this scenario really happens, I'm being a little facetious about it, but this happens every day, especially on Sundays, football or baseball, okay? And you can do the same thing by taking those children with you to go volunteer at MANA, LSS, Harbor House, the churches and the faith organizations that are feeding them. Let those kids, you want them to have an experience, don't hand $20 out the window of your Volvo, okay? You take your child and spend an evening in feeding kids, that's an experience they'll take their entire life.
We're actually at the time limit, but there's some really good questions. I'm going to do 2 more questions. Is that okay? All right. Tracy, maybe you can answer this, because I think the Jones versus Los Angeles ruling, maybe it's further than that, but this is one that we're really struggling with in all communities across the country, and it's this. When will our elected officials produce legislation that will compel people with mental health or drug or alcohol issues for mandatory help?
So, you know, one of the things that I've looked at with respect to our camping and sleeping ordinance, and I've had this debate, I mean, I'm sure everyone's had this discussion around the family table. What do you do with a person who is mentally unstable and has mental challenges? How do you get them the resources that they so need but they might not want based on their mental capacity? You know, I think it's actually a question that it doesn't really have an answer to it. When I think about how it was back in the 70s, where we had many mental institutions and the pendulum was way over here, that people were institutionalized for a myriad of things that they may or may not should have been institutionalized for. And then you're over here now, and it's very, very difficult. And I'm sure that, Tara, you can talk about it. It is very, and the police chief, it is so difficult to get someone the services that they so need. We see that on a regular basis when we go to court for our homeless citations. If we, you know, again, when we talk about issuing citations for drinking in public, I don't do it to every person who, has a can of beer in their hand. We use it for the purpose of getting them to court to get them the social services that they need. But it is a very high bar for a court to determine that their rights to make their own decisions can be taken away from them based on their mental capacity. It's a very, very high bar. We have to get them to agree to want those services, and it's really difficult. I'm sure that probably everyone up here can attest to that. It's a very, very difficult situation. They have the right to be left alone. They have the right to do that, just like I have the right to be left alone. So where does that line, you draw the line in the sand? I don't have the answer to that question. No? Nobody else?
You know what? There's at least 16 more questions.
Wow.
And I'm going to ask all of you, number 1, did you enjoy this today? Is it helpful? That's what I was going to ask next. Thanks for stealing my thunder. Let's do this again, and let's invite more people. What do you say? Yeah. All right. I've given you comments throughout the evening. First of all, I guess I'll just conclude by saying how grateful I am that you all came out. We will do this again. It's been tremendously helpful, and I look forward to reading the rest of the questions. The panel will get the rest of the questions. To the best of our ability, we'll address them in the future meetings as well. Keep doing this. It's an education process for all of us. We're looking for answers. I want to thank our panel for coming tonight and helping us. So. There's resource tables out there. The staff and panelists will be available for questions out in the foyer. And Councilmember Bill de la Peña is going to close us tonight with her final comments and thoughts. So welcome.
Thank you, Mayor McCoy. As Mayor McCoy said, this is an education process for all of us, including the City Council. The biggest takeaway I have from our very first homelessness symposium this afternoon is the challenges that we face. And while many of us might agree that housing is the answer, in my opinion, the biggest obstacle is NIMBYism. That is a very big problem. The City of Thousand Oaks heard a case of a housing development that had market rate housing with just about 4 low-income or affordable housing.
And what we heard from the residents and neighbors that evening was a little shocking. You have to remember that low-income housing is considered a family of four or a household making about $80,000 a year. $80,000, that's considered low income. And we're trying to provide housing for that level of income. But when we have residents, as in this one particular case, coming to the council to say they don't want that type of housing in their neighborhood, they don't want their children to walk past that housing, that type of housing on their way to school, we have a problem. We have a serious problem. And I urge you, I implore you to talk to your friends, neighbors, anyone here in the city of Thousand Oaks. Let them know what we are trying to do. Let them know what low income means. Let them know that there are some things we can do for the homeless problem and the homeless persons here in the city of Thousand Oaks. Let them know what you learned here this afternoon, that the majority of homeless people are from Thousand Oaks, and that we do have nonprofits who are able to provide services. And until everybody really understands that, we won't find a solution to the problem. We won't be able to manage the problem. But we need everybody to understand how this works, why it is happening, and then we hopefully will be able to request funding for more help from the state, especially. So I also wanted to thank TOTV for putting together this 15-minute video that really shined a spotlight on this problem. They worked very hard on this. I would like to thank our Assistant City Manager, Ingrid Hardy, for guiding the ad hoc committee of Rob McCoy and myself through the last year and a half. She did that along with Ashley Humes and in concert with our city attorney's office. So when we say it takes a village, it really does take a city of 130,000 residents. So again, talk to your friends and neighbors what you learned here today. We will be showing today's symposium on YouTube. We were live on Facebook as well. And if anybody wants to watch what happened today, they can do that in the next few days when we will post the video. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your interest in this, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon and early evening.